what are you excited for coming into for this year?
For myself personally, I think it's a year of shedding a lot of my old habits and beliefs and ways of living and really stepping into my soul's purpose and what I came here to really do in the big picture of all things. Or not what I came here to do, but what I came to be a channel for, most likely. Because it doesn't really feel like I'm doing anything. I just keep surrendering my free will to Mother, Father, God, and allowing it to work through me, and then magic just happens. So that's life right now.
Surrender. I love this. You know, just surrendering to the mother, surrendering to the father, surrendering to the universe, and just to the all.
Yes.
So I'm just gonna ask one more time. So this time we'll just take them out because it sounds like it's messing with the fabric. It sounds like it's like
Oh, I also have rude rakshas, so maybe I should take them off actually.
It just sounded like they were moving against something, the microphone.
Yeah.
The microphone. But it's all good. It's all good. I love this just that topic of, surrender. It's something that for the longest time, for so many years it was hard for me to do.
Yeah.
What's been the most challenging part and also the most gratifying part about surrender, like about releasing and letting go for you?
Currently, the most challenging and transforming part of it all has been to surrender of my biggest self-sabotaging habit, which has been people-pleasing. So that is kind of like the big boss that I'm fighting myself in my own experience right now, to really just step away and see when it's time to conserve my energy and maintain it for myself instead of giving it away freely when it isn't reciprocated in the same way. So I'm really just learning to collect myself and have really healthy boundaries.
So those healthy boundaries, like you said, the people pleasing, I mean, a lot of us go through that. I myself included. I definitely went a lot through that back in the day. And I don't remember, Merkaba, like I can't really pinpoint the moment that I just kind of let that go and just was like, you know what? I'm just going to be me. I don't care. I'm just going to be myself. Who cares what they say? Who cares how they judge, criticize? I don't remember when I finally let go of the fear of criticism, because it was simultaneously the fear of being judged and then the yearning to perfection, like wanting perfection or wanting things to be perfect kind of made me procrastinate on putting my best foot forward when it came to just my pursuits, when it came to just, my level of trust in my own abilities, my own talent, my own gifts,
Yeah.
So can you say the same?
Oh, yes. It's, I think that really comes along with the people pleasing, that as we please others and take care of their situations in life, we kind of sabotage for ourselves and what we need to step into and what we need to do for ourselves. So it is just a vicious cycle for everyone included. Everybody you're helping, when you're people pleasing, you're actually doing them a disservice, and yourself included. So it's really a very detrimental habit that all of humanity has to get rid of. And I don't even know if I read it somewhere, but I read it in the scripture or something. I remember that it was even called to be a sin to people please and to not be in your own authentic self, to not choose what you know is best for the all and for everything, because when you people please, you do it from a place of fear. Like you said, you do it from a place of being afraid of being judged or, looked upon as different in some way. So you do it to make sure that you don't receive those judgments or those opinions from people.
Right. So if somebody's going through that now, Merkaba, and they're wondering, how do I break out of this cycle? You know, like, how do I break out of this vicious pattern of pleasing? And they're just wanting to, like, find a solution because it's had them down for so long. What would be like a step by step, you know, that you would give somebody to finally emancipate themselves from that sabotage or that slavery over themselves?
I think to tune in to oneself and really listen deeply to one's needs, what one's core needs are. Do you get your core basic needs met? Like shelter, a safe home, an environment to be in, you know, like these basic things that we need as human beings. If you don't have those things, then if you are in an environment with people that are already toxic or already maybe also in a state of being in a lower frequency and not being able to fully take care of themselves, it's not fully easy to see where the boundaries are supposed to be.
Yeah.
So you have to really get back to yourself. You have to collect yourself. You have to gather yourself. Come back to the center and really start looking within. Am I getting my needs met? Do I get what I need for my thriving, for my evolution? Because that's what it's all about. Everything on planet Earth, we come here to learn. We come here to evolve. We come here for self-mastery and to work through old karmic patterns so that we can liberate ourselves from them. So everything here is truly just a teacher, and that's how we have to look at life. We have to observe it and have to see how we can learn from things. And these things with the people pleasing is exactly the same thing. It's really a lesson in learning how to choose God, because when you choose yourself, in the end, you choose God.
Wow. When did you feel like, or when did you realize that those two things were synonymous? You know, that choosing yourself was choosing God and choosing the all. Like, when did you have that realization that these are actually the same thing?
The realization actually came to me very, very many years ago, in the very beginning of my awakening, to be honest. But I think 10 years ago or something, yeah, it was very early. But the integration and the grounding and the true understanding of what it means that when I choose myself, I choose God, that has taken years to integrate and understand, because we are programmed by society, by other people around us, to believe that when we are choosing ourselves, we're being selfish, which cannot be farther from the truth. So that is something everybody has to come back to. And like you mentioned, slavery, this people pleasing is connected to slavery mindset. And it is, in a sense, something that is still very deeply encoded into the collective unconscious, that we are slaves to our mind, we are slaves to the matrix, we are slaves to the government, to the programs, to the foods, to everything that we're just about to talk about. Everything outside of us controls us if we aren't fully present and fully aware of our center, our core. And as we are people pleasing, we can't be fully aware of our center and our core, because we are so out of touch with our own body, with our own needs. And we're actually floating around, just taking care of everything outside and around of us, instead of being like in the core of like, okay, my heart and my being, my
Right.
vessel, my expression.
Exactly. And I love this, Merkaba, because, you know, when you said that this awareness came years ago, you know, that you
Mm,
came into this awareness many years ago,
mm,
you know, many years ago, I was in the church
mm,
and I was, you know, I was raised in the church, raised Christian and Seventh-day Adventist. And, you know, they had a conception of God, you know, of
mm,
who God is and what they believed God is and how they believe that, you know, God is watching over us and we should just give it to God and just let it be. And, you know, what you're saying when you talk about yourself and God, it doesn't sound religious. You know, it doesn't sound like it has that kind of connotation or that religious vibration. So can you just speak just a little bit more on what you mean when you're speaking of this awareness? Because it really sounds like much more profound than what we commonly hear about in society.
Yeah, well, this is such a big topic for me also to talk about. But I myself personally was an atheist all of my life until I awakened.
Okay.
So I fully denied God and everything, and I was raised in a Catholic church also, and baptized Catholically. I don't know that word, whatever. And so these things, I really denied them all of my life. As soon as I got told that there is a white bearded man up in the sky deciding if I go to heaven or hell, I was like, oh, hell no. No, I'm not complying with that. So I was an atheist for 21 years of my life, and I really denied all belief in any higher power whatsoever until I awakened. And that began with me actually seeing a documentary that explained that we have a pineal gland and DMT, the spirit molecule, if you've ever heard of that documentary. I saw that, and that really awakened me because I had proof for the first time ever for God. I understood that God is something that we all have inside of us, and that it is what gives us life and what maintains us, what fulfills us, what keeps us alive. So when I came into that awareness, I started to shift a lot, and then I started to really go deep into what God meant for me. And again, I went so deeply into religious beliefs and everything, and of course I had like almost a disgust for Christianity because it has portrayed the feminine and the female as a whore and a prostitute, when in fact the feminine is what births new worlds into creation and, you know, brings life into all that is. And without the feminine, we could not even experience the earth that we're on. So for me, I started to dive deep into what God meant for me, and I understood that God was not a he. God was not a singular masculine energy. God was actually a holy trinity. And it was the mother, it was the father, and it was the child that was created by them too. So as I came into those understandings of the Holy Trinity, and I started working on my own Holy Trinity within, and of course Merkaba came with all of that to me, and I started to really come into the understanding of who I was also with all of this, then my whole experience truly changed, and I just started seeing everything as God.
Yes.
And I started understanding that there isn't anything in reality that is not God. And everything, no matter if it's dark or if it's light, no matter if it's painful or if it's blissful, it's all God. It's all just different frequencies of all of the wavelengths of God that we can experience.
Wow. Wow.
So for me, it became so clear that all of the programs from religion and everything that we've been given by society, by the collective, and by the conditioning, by his story, was just false. Everything was false, and the feminine is what we need to restore and bring back to return the balance and make that Holy Trinity whole again. So for me, that is why I say, oh my goddess, instead of oh my God. Like I really have those things in my language that I really try to balance out the collective when I speak. And every time people mention that God is a he, I'm like, no, God is an it. It is an energy. It is everything. It is all that is. You cannot define God as a he or as a she. It is all that is. So, and that is also what I feel is the main part of my incarnation on earth, is to unify that consciousness and that understanding the depths of what God actually is, that it is the full expression of all that is.
Mm-hmm. My goodness, Merkaba, thank you for this. Thank you for this. Just these, just these insights, your testimony, and just this timeless wisdom that you've garnered, over your journey, and just come into these inner standings. I love this, I love that you really reflect that and really embody that. And this is the first time I've heard it in this way, so eloquently expressed. You said the wavelengths of God. The different wavelengths of God. Just like think about that. You said everything is God. You said you started to see everything is God. Like that caterpillar over there, that dragonfly over there, that hawk over there, that mushroom over there. Like everything is God.
Yes, all of it.
Wow. Wow. And so we ourselves are operating in these wavelengths as well.
Yes.
Okay. So when we're talking about as well, because you've mentioned some videos, and if people don't know, definitely follow Merkaba on YouTube as well as here on Instagram, because she's putting out these messages into the field, just raising awareness and sharing the message on karmic consumption, and just so many different topics. But this one right here is a very interesting one, and I feel like the world needs to hear it. So can you talk about, how this topic you feel is pertinent today and never more important to be spoken on?
Yes, my heart starts racing just as you mention it, because it brings so much intensity from my soul when I talk about this. So, karmic consumption is what we're all indoctrinated into doing, and what we're all being brought up into and born into reluctantly. So the consumption that we're born into is a consumption that is based on fear and on death. And this consumption is also what manifests our reality, because whatever we consume and incorporate into the vehicle that translates our reality that we experience, that vehicle, as we incorporate death into it, we will create that feedback loop of more death and more suffering and more misery and more pain. So as people, as the collective, as humans, as a whole, consume death, consume flesh, consume slavery, basically, then we incorporate that into our cellular structure, and we allow that not only for the collective, but for ourselves also. So with your consumption, not only are you choosing your death in a way, because this consumption can only bring death. If you consume death, you can expect death. If you consume life, you can expect life. So this consumption will only bring death to your vessel and to your experience. And not only that, it will also keep you and maintain you in a frequency of misery, of suffering, of lack, and of slavery. So this consumption, this karmic consumption, and I'm mainly talking about the consumption of flesh, of dead animals. This consumption, when you do that, when you participate in that, you knowingly or unknowingly allow yourself and put yourself in the karmic cycle and into the reincarnation loop. And as long as you keep consuming in this way, you keep consuming flesh and death, you are not able to awaken from this horrific nightmare. And this is something that is very hard for people to understand, how it really creates and affects our reality if you haven't been able to see the generational patterns over many, many, many years. So you have to really look at, again, his story, what has been happening to, like, throughout history. And we have to observe how people have consumed. And as we look at just the 100 years back, we can see how humanity has really transformed with the consumption that it has been fed. And the consumption has been focusing on more death, more poison, and more distortion. So that is the basis for it.
For sure. You know, thank you for this message. And people are also in here in Merkaba. They're thanking you for this message. You know, like people are already talking about, you know, this is powerful. Like we see you, we love you. You know, this is a powerful conversation, blessings, and just letting you know that they're in alignment with this. And they're, you know, people are yearning for more information because so many people, we live in stagnation. You know, we live in a constant state of constipation and we don't know how to break free, you know? And there was an emotional video that I recall of you, and it was very emotional, you know, just for myself as well, because it made me recall how emotional I got when I saw things, when I finally saw slaughterhouse videos and just, you know, these things, like you said, the incorporation of death, you know, the integration and incorporation of death in the vessel that has transpired, like that has gone through just such a horrific, you know, experience, and then just you're intaking that death, you're absorbing all of that energy, you know. And if we're going to go by the rule or the law that energy is just transferred, you know, it's not like it's created or destroyed, but it passes from one form to another, then we're like incorporating that form into our body and into our vessel. So you know, it's no wonder I was, you know, constantly depressed and constantly angry and constantly stressed and constantly worried and constantly anxious and constantly, like all of those things I was constantly experiencing, but I never put two and two together. I never equated or even correlated what I was consuming and just putting in my body, you know, day after day. So there was an emotional video I saw of you where you were pointing out, you were like in the section of the grocery store where the animals were just lining the shelves, and you were looking at the, you know, the steaks and the T-bones and all these things that people go and they put, you know, A1 steak sauce and hot sauce and lather it up in condiments and all sorts of seasonings, and just without reasoning and just putting it in, you know, the oven and just you know, all these things. You were like, these are living, these are sentient beings,
Yes.
you know. Like you were showing, you were like, does anybody realize, or am I crazy, am I crazy, or does anybody realize these are sentient beings, these are living beings? So I know you mentioned childhood, that these are the things where things get twisted and get distorted. Can you talk a little bit more about how things kind of get out of whack during childhood?
Well, I mean, it all depends upon the families and the lineages that we are born into, but most of us, like 99.5%, are born into flesh-eating families. And that is what most of us come here to transmute. The biggest traumas that Mother Earth is experiencing during this ascension process is consumption and sexual traumas. These are the two biggest things. So the planet is being raped and being abused on the daily. That is the biggest things that we are here to transmute for the Mother, for the Earth. And we are only channels to transmute the pain that she's going through. So we're just here helping as volunteers, as soldiers, as warriors of light, you know. And where was I going with all of
Well,
this?
yeah, the only reason why I mentioned this is because, you know, thank you for this testimony, because I had a conversation with one of my friends. Her name is Jackie, And she said that when she was young, Merkaba, she said that her father, she said she was asking like, what is this? Like she wanted to know what it was that she was eating, what her family was feeding.
Yeah.
And she said her father, later on, years later, her father told her that he was afraid to tell her where it came from because he was worried that if he told her what she was actually eating, that she wouldn't eat it, that she wouldn't think that she needed it. So he refrained from telling her like, yeah, this was an animal, like this was a living being. He didn't tell her that. I don't know what he told her, but he was afraid to tell her that because he was worried that she wouldn't accept it, that she would neglect it, that her soul would not reflect it, you know? So with yourself, because I definitely was not raised that way. I only came into this awareness maybe like in my late 20s, probably around 28, 29. Like this was when I was starting to just break free from that consciousness and understand what have I been doing all these years. So when was the moment, if you can pinpoint that, where it was like a line in the sand for you, like there's no going back? Yeah.
I think I was about 16 when I met a friend in school that was vegan, and she was like a really militant vegan. She was like really like not the positive kind of vegan, but the kind of vegan that like makes you feel ashamed for eating flesh, basically, which are also needed in the world. Everything is needed, of course, so it's perfect. But she started talking a lot about consumption of flesh for me, and she started to plant a lot of seeds inside of my consciousness. And then I think I started telling my mother that I didn't want to eat meat as much. But I, as everybody else, grew up in a massively indoctrinated household that consumed excessive amounts of meat. And my mother was like, no way that we are even a little changing what we're going to cook for your needs or for what you want. So she was absolutely not like shifting anything for me or for what I was asking about. So I couldn't actually change my diet until I moved from home, and that was when I was 18, and it took like only 2 months. And then as soon as I was out there, I started just removing meat. And then I remember the actual moment. It was when I had made a soup for myself, and it was like with these meatballs. And I usually didn't even cook meat because I basically didn't know how to cook meat. And I thought that it was kind of nasty to like touch and do stuff with. But I made this soup, and this was a soup that my mother had made me as a child a lot when I was like sick and stuff like that. So it was kind of an inner child thing. And then I was eating this soup, and while I'm eating it, I'm on Facebook scrolling, and actually, just like you, I see a clip from Earthlings. And I'm eating the soup, and I'm watching the clip, and I'm like, what am I consuming? And I'm just, every spoon I'm eating, I'm just like, no, okay, no, I'm good. I'm good. I think I'm good. And that was the moment that I realized that consumption of flesh was just so insane. And I really, in that moment, I decided that that was it. Of course, I have consumed flesh afterwards several times, but it's been from different points of view to like try to see if there's something that I need from this, or to see if there's, because I've always been one to really try to see life from all points of view and not try to judge anything and try to experience the full spectrum of everything. So I've gone back to meats and tried to see if there's something that I need from it. But every time it's been like fully, my body has been rejecting it, my consciousness has been rejecting it, and it's just been a full no. Like there is no prana in this for my vessel. There is nothing that I need from this food.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like no animal needs to die in order for me to live. That's a realization, definitely, because thank you for that reflection. Like, thank you for that connection. And that was at 16. You said you were 16?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So young. I mean, geez, I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, where would I be? You know, where would my life be if I had done that at 16? Because, you know, I, like many individuals, when you come into this awareness and you finally make that shift and that transition, you wonder, sometimes you wonder, like, wow, if only I had started sooner, you
Mm.
know, like if I had let go of that sooner, what would I have avoided? What would I have not had to go through? But I definitely, you know, understand that I wouldn't be as, I guess, militant, or I wouldn't be as, you know, mindful, or I wouldn't be as, you know, maniacal as I am now about the message that I have now if I hadn't gone through all of the lower vibration of that level of stagnation, you know,
Mm.
just the constant, yeah, fluctuation of just my emotions, my feelings, the up and downs of, you know, just mood swings, and the temper tantrums and sudden eruptions and spontaneously combustions, and just like on my loved ones, you know,
Right.
on family members, people that were close to me, saying things that you can't take back, you know,
Mm.
speaking things you can't take back, wounding people you can't erase that, you know, you gotta face that.
Mm.
So when you're talking about this, I mean, geez, you know, witnessing this at 16, my goodness, because, you know, for me, when I saw that same documentary, it was
Mm.
Earthlings, and people told me about Dominion. To this day, Merkaba, to this day, I still have not seen Dominion. I
Oh, I
haven't
don't
seen it, but
even know which one it is.
so
I don't. I'm.
that's another
Oh,
level. So
oh,
apparently Dominion is even another level. They have, you know,
wow.
the undercover footage of the
Mm.
hidden cameras and the slaughterhouses, and just, you know, seeing people, you know, holding pigs by their tails and slamming them into things, and just like, you know, just ridiculous, like not even just killing, but torturing, you know, just ridiculous. It's crazy. Just, it makes you question, or at least it makes me question our humanity, you know, our humanity, like who we are as a soul being, to do that to other soul beings that have a soul, that have a heart, that have emotions, that have families, that have children, that have offspring, that are taken away and slaughtered. So, you know, just thinking about that, and then when you're coming to this understanding, like, I couldn't go back. Once
Mm.
I saw that same thing, you know, you were eating and you were like, wait a minute, huh? You know, you were eating, huh? Like something wasn't right.
Mm.
And you mentioned the soup, because I saw that you put up, I think it was one of these days, there was something on your story. Somebody had put up a reel, and you probably remember they were talking about soup, and they said that, you know, somebody making soup from a recipe from ages ago, and
Mm-hmm.
that this is like dark magic or black magic or some sort of, you know, sorcery or witchcraft or whatever they called it. But they were talking about, you know, just the making of these, a mixture of animal body parts, you know, animal flesh, and, you know, these
Herb.
different ingredients. Yeah, herbs, ingredients, animal
Mm.
flesh, body parts. And
Elementals, and then you use fire to like to warm it up, to cook it. So it's like you use all of the elements. You use magic. You use the earth to create these concoctions and these potions. They are potions.
in like a
Yes.
cauldron, in like the cauldron. Yeah.
Yes. It's full on witchcraft. It's full on witchcraft, and everybody are fully oblivious to that it is witchcraft.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can you touch on that, because you mentioned in your story today, it said that all flesh eating is black magic. Can you talk about
Mhm.
that piece that people don't hear very often?
Mm. Yeah, well, again, as we're talking about it, like you said, you were also consuming these things, and I was consuming these things, and we were indoctrinated into consuming these
Mhm.
things. But it wasn't always that we fully knew why we were consuming these things,
Right,
or that we really enjoyed consuming these
right.
things. We just did it for the sake of being indoctrinated into it, and that it was a habit incorporated into our vessel already.
Mhm.
So we just did what we've been used to. But we didn't really understand or understand why we were doing it. And why we do it is because as we consume these things, death brings more death. And this goes even deeper. This is like the rabbit hole goes so deep. And if you're not ready for this, then you should go. But if you consume death, you allow to give birth to parasites inside of your body. Because what parasites do, they are cleaners. When we look at in nature, if an animal dies in the forest, what will happen? There will come a bunch of flies, they will put a bunch of eggs there, and there will be born a bunch of maggots. And these maggots will start to consume the dead flesh and the dead animal and poop out dirt and soil, and the cycle of life continues. And so this is what the flesh does. We start to be indoctrinated into our families. We're born into these lineages that consume the flesh, that are already doing this, and it's already incorporated into us before we're even born. So we don't really have a chance to really like understand that this is wrong if we're like not like born with a super open third eye, which is quite rare. But not anymore, like as we're coming into the new ages and the crystal children. But before, we didn't have these opportunities and these privileges. So most of us really came into it and we had the veil for our eyes and we just consumed everything that was given to us. And we didn't like question it at all. But what happens is once you start to raise your consciousness to the higher chakras and beyond the lower, which are all about consumption, and you start to think for yourself and question these things, you start to understand and feel the dissonance of what you're doing, and then you start to shift your habits and your beliefs. And as you start to shift your habits and your beliefs, you discover that you have a bunch of parasites inside of you. And these parasites in turn are so much more powerful than people understand. Like these parasites control our glands, they control our hormonal production, they control our our dopamine, our serotonin, all of our stimulants and hormones and everything that just creates the reality that we experience. And if we allow to consume flesh and death and suffering, we just keep on birthing these parasites that are just trying to clean us up. Because that's actually what they do. That is also something I really tried to dive deeply into when I discovered that I had this. I was really trying to understand and go away from being afraid of it. And I came to the understanding that the parasites were actually doing me a favor, but as long as I keep incorporating stuff that is not food into my body, then I will allow these entities to exist in me. And these entities then in turn send us thoughts, send us impulses, send us actions that we want to do, and we're not then fully in control of our vessel, of what we do, of what we think, of, like you say, how we act toward our family members, how we speak with them. We are not sovereign in our own vessel. We are not the full operator of our own vessel, but there are other entities actually controlling us. So this rabbit hole is so, I'm sorry, almost, it's really, really deep. It goes so deep. So it really takes a lot of understanding of reality and a lot of uncovering of the shadow to be able to face this, because you realize that you have been the one doing this to yourself all of your life.
Right. The self-inflicted, self-inflicted is definitely, and no need to apologize for how deep, the rabbit hole goes. Like we need to go there, we need to go there. We need to be asking questions. We need to be a little bit skeptical of the ways that we've been living, just the continuation, each generation continuation, just without the meditation and the contemplation of the situation. So we really do need to dive deep, because oh man, it sounds like what you're saying, Merkaba, we should be thanking the parasites. Like we should
Yeah.
actually be, you know, giving gratitude and appreciation for the parasitic vibration in our body, because it's trying to clean up the, you know, the desiccated flesh, the putrefying flesh that is decaying and staying. It's staying and decaying in our body. And even though we keep putting it back in, it's trying to, you know, get rid of it. It's trying to eat it up. So
Yeah.
even though it's blocking us, you know, we're not receiving that gut guidance, that gut instinct, or that gut intuition, we
Mm.
still continue just putting it inside. But if it weren't for the parasites, things probably would be a lot worse if it weren't for them. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. And this is like you're saying, like we talked about before, the different wavelengths of the reality and the understanding that even the parasites are part of God, are part of love, are part of creation as a whole. They would not be here if they wouldn't have a purpose. So that was why I was diving deeply into understanding what is their purpose. Why am I afraid of having parasites inside my body? And then I understood, oh my goodness, they're trying to clean me up, because that's the nature, that's the natural course of existence. That's how life works. They're just trying to do their natural job. They wouldn't be here if I would not have created an environment for them to be in.
Big point. Big point. Major key. You know, you give me a vision, Merkaba. You give me like when you were speaking earlier about the maggots, you know, on the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Like you know, I walk a lot here in Texas. I walk long distance, and I just walk to and fro from the store, grab my juice or my coconut water and come back.
Mm.
And you know, the miles and miles that I walk every day, you know, I'm here in Texas. They drive, you know, fast, big cars, fast all the time. Everything's big in Texas, and they're not really worried about wildlife. You know, it's not the you know, people think, why did the deer cross the road? They never think, why is the road crossing the forest? You know,
Right.
like they never think that way. They think, oh, it's the deer's fault. They got in the way. So
Mm-hmm.
I see deers, dogs, cats every day on the side of the road, on the sidewalk, and I get to see the process every day that I'm walking.
Mm-hmm.
Just the next day and the next day, I see how much more it's decayed, and the next day I see they're eating their way out of the flesh. They're eating their way out of the body, and there's thousands and thousands of these maggots eating their way out of this deer or this dog or this cat on the side of the road. And I'm like just watching this progress, like, wow, like this is, you know, just looking at that process and just thinking to myself, my goodness, you know, like what are we harboring? You know, just asking myself, what was I doing all those years? Like that is what I was taking in my body. And just to see that process unfold, the
Mm-hmm.
progressive decaying of the body,
Mm-hmm.
it gives you perspective for life. You know, it gives you perspective for this vessel. It gives you perspective for, you know, what we have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, it's so true. And what I really want to touch upon that I actually wrote down
Go ahead.
is really important also when we talk about the consumption of meat here, when you talk about it and like incorporating the suffering into the body, is that like something that so many of us aren't aware of is that the adrenochrome that we know that the elites consume, and if we are aware of everything that's happening in all the spectrums of the experience of the earth, then we know that there is a thing called adrenochrome. And this adrenochrome is not only applied to the people that do it on the higher ranks. The animals that we consume, they're also scared to death just as much as everybody else. They know what they are gonna face when they're in the slaughterhouses. Like they hear their families being taken away from them. They hear their screams and their shoutings. They feel the fear. They feel the suffering. They're extremely afraid. And this is something that I think a lot of people even if they are aware that meat isn't the most high frequency thing to consume, they are not aware that they are actually consuming fear on a massive, massive, massive scale. Because sure, if you talk about consuming a deer that was hunted and that was killed with a gunshot and wasn't even aware that it was gonna like go through this like transition from physical to non-physical, but these animals are farmed. They are like produced for consumption. Their life cycle is all about being produced and grown to be killed. They're only here to feed people. And not only are they here to feed people and to be consumed and all of the things, but imagine how many of these animals are actually thrown away afterwards. Imagine how much meat on earth is on the daily just thrown away, either cooked or uncooked. Like I mean, when I think about this, I've worked in supermarkets myself. I know like how much they throw away in just one store. Imagine the whole world. Imagine all of the slaughterhouses. We kill millions of animals every single year. And these animals are so afraid. They're so afraid. They cast a whole like shadow around the earth of just suffering, of just so much pain. And this cloaking of the earth that is all around, it can never go away as long as this loop and this cycle continues, as long as we kill these millions of animals every single day. And so the adrenochrome is not only for the elites that consume children and that do all these satanic sick things. The adrenochrome is equally as much consumed by every single person that eats animal flesh, because adrenochrome is a hormone that is released by the adrenal glands when you are scared to death. When you are scared for your life, you are releasing this adrenaline, this adrenochrome, and this is actually our most potent and pure life force. That is why it maintains the people that consume it. That is why people actually can sustain consuming meat and staying alive for such a long time, because they're consuming adrenochrome. So it's like, it's so crazy when you start looking at how not only are these things happening on a big world mass scale with really like insane things happening because they're consuming people and humans, but they're also indoctrinating the lower class, or all of the regular people, the 99%, the rest of all of us, to do the same satanic rituals for the world to keep us all in this collective nightmare and in this reincarnation cycle. So the consumption of meat is really the most, absolutely most detrimental thing to start to question and investigate when it comes to one's own life.
Wow, wow. Whew. This is a message, more people need to hear right now, because, I'm getting so many visions as you're speaking, Merkaba, about, like you say, adrenochrome and just the life that is taken and absorbed into, one's own being. And then the feeling that you're sustaining your life off of another life, like off of another sentient being. It's like, one of the things that came to mind was, there was you ever heard of this game called Mortal Kombat?
Mm-hmm.
It was a game I used to play back in the day. It was a pretty graphic, pretty gory game.
Mm.
And it was an arcade game. And it was a fighting game called Mortal Kombat. There was a character named Shang Tsung.
Mm-hmm.
Shang Tsung was one of the top characters, like right beneath Goro. He was like one of the head honcho characters in this game, right up there with Quan Chi and all these people. And Shang Tsung, the way that he lived was by taking people's souls.
Mm.
Like he would look at somebody and he would reach out his hand and he'd say, "Your soul is mine." And then their soul would be vacuumed into his body, and then he would gain a new body. Like first his beard was gray, his hair was gray, like his skin was all wrinkly, everything was all, disheveled and, elderly. And then he would reach over and, "Your soul is mine." And then he would take their soul and then he would be young again, right? And it was like his vitality was coming from someone's vital force, like their life force energy was somehow, extending his life in a dark way. But without more souls, he would just wither and rot away. He would wither away because, all those souls in one body. And then, Dr. Sleep, there was a movie called Dr. Sleep where they were doing that in the movie. I mean, it was kind of blatantly, that message was in the movie where they were taking it from children. They were like sucking, like they literally almost like performing CPR, like with the breath that somebody was coming, their essence, their breath was coming out. And then these people were just kind of like drinking from the spirit of their soul, So, this is very sinister when you're talking about this, and as well as just the word itself, when you're talking about the word meat. I don't know how true this is, but it made sense to me when somebody said that the word meat, it used to be METE. They said that back in some, different era, like maybe a medieval era or I don't know what era, but they just used the word meat to call food, like it was just food, but then these flesh peddlers, the people that were peddling the animals, they needed like a word, like some harmless word, to call the flesh that they were peddling, so that people would, because they needed more people to consume it. So they were like, okay, let's call it something. What's a word we can call it? And then meat, that became the word.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of passed on generation to generation. We're further desensitized with the language. So the language kind of, it allows for this cognitive dissonance. This is my theory. This is a working theory of mine, but it allows kind of for this separation vibration of dissonance in the mind where we're distancing ourselves from another being, and we're labeling meat, like, yeah, I have meat sometimes, sometimes I don't have meat. Oh, I stopped eating meat. But we don't say I stopped eating flesh, like we don't say, you know what, I stopped eating flesh, I can't eat flesh anymore. Oh, you're still eating flesh. If we said these things, it kind of would have more of a, like a wake up call. Like we don't say I'm eating cows today.
Yeah.
We say we're eating beef and broccoli, right? At Panda Express, I'm eating beef. We don't say I'm eating cow and broccoli, I'm eating beef. We don't say we're eating, pigs, we're eating pork, we're eating ham, right? Pork chops, ham sandwiches, pork chops. We're disconnecting. It's the language. So thank you for this, because I feel like if we said what we're actually eating, like dead bodies, these are dead bodies. You would feel more like a vulture, like a vulture circling over a head, like picking at dead bodies. These are dead bodies.
Right. And that doesn't seem very natural for humans to do.
No, not at all. Yeah.
It doesn't take much. When we start to question, when we start to really think for ourselves, it doesn't take much to realize that these things are not aligned with love and with the highest good of all. It doesn't take that much to really come to your own understandings. And if you don't come to your own understandings, just think about it. Would you be able to go out and slaughter a cow and go through the whole process of everything that needs to be done to then be able to grill your steak and marinate your meat and grill your steak and do the things you do? Like, would you be able to do that for yourself? If you could, I mean, there's people who say they can, but I for myself could never do something like that. And then I know that why would I ever put it inside my body if I could not do the process that creates this thing so that I could consume it. There is just no way in my logical mind, when I think about the transformation that humanity is in, with what we are going through, being like pumped with so much light and so much information to be able to really illuminate all of the shadows and everything. It just does not make sense for me in any way that the new earth frequency would contain the consumption of flesh and death in my eyes. There is no way that we do that on New Earth. New Earth is aligned with us all being guardians for the sentient beings, us being equals as the sentient beings. The saying that we are all one doesn't just apply to you and me, Jerome. It applies to me and my cat. It applies to me and the rat. It applies to me and the cockroach. It applies to me and the parasite. It applies to me and everything, because everything is part of God, and we have to find a way to alchemize and to love all of these expressions of God. But then we have to also find our own discernment in what we as God creator beings choose to allow to continue to unfold, what we feed into our own feedback loop, what we continue to create and paint the reality with, that we are all experiencing as a collective. Because the thing with karmic consumption is that it doesn't touch only our own life, it touches us all. What we do creates reality on a mass scale for us all, and that is why I have been saying and are still saying and will probably be saying forever that the awakening for humans here on Earth is all about consumption.
Okay. This is the message.
Yeah.
We needed this. We needed this today. And, now that people have, just some more awareness while listening to you, Merkaba, you know, just as you were painting a picture of new earth, you know, just the picture, the brighter future, the just on the horizon, do you feel like you see, a positive upliftment or a positive shift for humanity if we, can write these things, can turn things around? What is your vision? Like, what do you see us doing? And, when we're not chewing these things that we've been chewing, what do you see us doing? Yeah.
Well, as we touched upon earlier, consumption and all of it connects us to the slavery mindset. If we consume 3 meals a day, if we have to eat 3 meals per day, 365 days per year, how much do we need to work to be able to consume that energy?
Yes.
How much energy do we have to output into the matrix to get that back so that we can maintain our consumption?
Right.
That is what it's all about. As long as you consume this way in death and flesh and these things, those things will keep you stuck and plugged into the matrix through your gut, and you will be a slave. You will not be able to awaken. You will not be able to liberate yourself. You will not be able to be a sovereign operator of your vessel, your choices, your actions, what you put inside your mouth and why, what thoughts you allow to come into your field. Like, you will not be able to be a conscious creator of your life. And then you will not vibrate in the frequency of new earth. So you will just go to another reality in which you will have to continue doing the 3D lessons. But if you are ready, if you are willing, and if your soul is at that stage of evolution that it understands these things about consumption, then that is where it all begins. It begins in the lower chakras with the densities that we eat with food, and then it goes up. What do you consume on your screens? What do you listen to? What do you read to? It goes up to the higher chakras. So consumption is not only the food that we allow to incorporate into our vessels. Everything is energy, everything is frequency and vibration. So whatever we listen to becomes equally as much part of ourselves as the flesh that we consume. It's all just different frequencies and wavelengths, just like different densities. Meat is very dense, while a song, music, is very light. It just disappears into nothingness when you play it. But there's these understandings of the different solidities of reality, and as long as we choose something very solid, something very, very dense, then that is the frequency we're choosing for our life experience. And that is what we will keep perpetuating for ourselves.
Okay.
Just simple as that.
Yeah. Simple input, simply plain. It sounds like, as we're lightening up, it's more enlightenment, you're
Yeah,
enlightened, Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, simple as that.
Less
It's
dense and
all
more light.
levels.
Yeah, the different wavelengths of God, as you said before, less dense makes sense. It just makes sense when we're less dense. It's more light, and you invite more light when you're in that state. So my goodness, Eva mentioned down here, she said more being will occur, less doing. So less doing,
Yeah.
less chewing, more being. And Nicole says, this feels like church. My soul needed this rising. She said, my soul needed this. My goodness. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Merkaba, for coming on here today. Really appreciate this message. And, if someone is listening to you and they really want to know more, or they would love to get in contact with you, get in touch or in tune with you, what would you say would be the best place for them to do that? Yeah.
Well, here on Instagram, my Instagram, I am Merkaba, or just my YouTube channel, I am Merkaba. I am in the midst of big life changes currently, and shifting timelines and quantumly evolving. So there will be coming out more content in the coming months, and I will share more of the messages that need to be shared with the collective at this time, because people are finally being receptive and ready to receive it. So it's fun that everything that I have been working for so many years is finally being ready to be received.
Right. How does that feel, by the way? How does it feel that it's ready? Like people are ready. How does that finally feel? Because I know it can be frustrating when they're just, yeah.
Well, it feels like a liberation from myself having to be in slavery, because maybe this, or not maybe, this will be me stepping into actually my soul's work and being of service to people that need to hear the message. So because people are ready to receive the message, that liberates me. So
Yeah.
it's all just a give and take, and a beautiful co-creation of us all.
An exchange, an
Yeah.
exchange. Yeah, for sure. Co-creation. I love that. The co-creation of God, the co-creation sovereignty. Please, thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for just being a conscious creator, for being courageous, for being brave enough to speak these things and touch these sensitive topics that people shy away from, they don't want to hear, and they don't want to acknowledge. You are unafraid, you are fearless, and we needed to hear this. So much love to you, Merkaba. Enjoy the rest of your moments.
Thank you. Thank you so much, dear Jerome. Thank you for having me. You're always such a light, and it's an honor to be here and to be reflected by your light and to share the message.
All right. Take care. Take care, everyone. Thank you all for joining.
God bless. May God be with you all.
Much love.